Hello, hello, hello there, everyone. It's Patricia Hayes here, your executive advisor, career empowerment coach, and authentic networking strategist with today's episode of the Coffee Time Career Chat. Super excited about it. This is the Authentic Networking Edition. So happy to be able to come share with you some thoughts about building out our professional relationships, building out our networks, and what it means to us right now, today, in these times, and moving forward. So, today's topic is about networking and with vulnerability, or being vulnerable in networking. It was kind of one of those toss-ups, which one sounds better or which one flows better. But the bottom line is that there's some things to definitely be considered when we're talking about engaging in authentic networking, building out those professional relationships that we need. It requires an element, or maybe more than an element, but several elements of vulnerability, of being open, of being a little, less stoic, as I might want to say, as we're dealing and approaching people. And one of those things that's really important is this issue of vulnerability comes up a lot, and it's a buzzword right now, right? Okay, so let's move past the buzzword piece of it and let's talk about what it really means. And what it really means is about how you're willing and able to show feelings, to show weakness, to show, another side of yourself in the course of engaging in some activity, some especially when it comes to engaging in relationships with others. So when we get to that, that is generally not something people want to do, especially in the business community, because being quote vulnerable is a sign of weakness, right? Or that in some way. And there's been a lot of shift and more conversations, I should say, stumbling through words here, but more conversations about how important it is to be able to connect with people. And when you're really trying to connect with people, there comes a point in time where you can't do it with your guard up. Like, you have to be willing to interact with people on a much different level, even in the business world, even in those professional colleagues and such. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about here is that, answering that question of why should we bother? Like, why should we bother with, being vulnerable when we're trying to build out these relationships? And here's the thing, achieving real connection is really the goal. And if that's really your goal, then you want to be able to share with people in a way that will encourage them to share back with you, to build up that relationship, to build up trust, which we'll talk about in just a second. But the goal is real connection. And so sometimes, just saying, hey, how are you doing? How's the family? That may not seem like a lot, but that could be a lot to someone because they're ready to, jump in there and talk all business. But if you ask them something personal, showing that you're caring about something other than the deal or other than whatever it is you're asking about, that allows you to take a step back and to connect with people on a different level, one that is much more authentic. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, right? Much more authentic. I know that there are, I've not mentioned it several times, but I'm thinking about one colleague in particular that down through the years, literally when we get together, whether it's on the phone or in person for a coffee or whenever it was, his first question to me was always like, how are you? How are the kids? How's the family? Right? Before we start talking any type of business, that's how we reconnect. And it's something that when we first started was very unusual, right? Because definitely wasn't used to men folk doing that. But it became a regular part of our repertoire and something that I truly appreciate, because once we did that and level set it about where we were personally, it was absolutely much easier to talk about our professional goals, dreams, whatever it is we were working on, the project, because we'd already made that connection. Which gets me to the second piece, which is long term relationships are built on trust. Right? So if you want to start making that connection that's going to lead to a long-term relationship, then you got to know that you're working on building up a pathway of trust with this person. And you don't always build trust by just jumping straight into talking about, well, I really need to cut this deal, or we really need to get this project going, or whatever. Believe it or not, people are absolutely open to having a conversation that doesn't dig directly into whatever business project, whatever angle that you're working. The whole point of building out relationships is so that you don't have to, quote, work an angle. That's the whole thing. That's the thing that makes people shy away from networking in the traditional sense, because they feel like they're being worked over. And no one likes that feeling at all. It's also the reason why a lot of times people won't share, because they're like, well, I can't really trust you, so why would I tell you something that's going to make me feel more exposed? Because that's what being vulnerable does, right? It makes you feel a little bit more exposed, but the whole point is that taking that chance on being exposed is going to gain you something in the long run, not in a gotcha kind of way, but from a perspective of, I want you to see that I am here and willing to share openly with you, so that we can build and establish a long-term relationship that's built on trust. Okay? So that's definitely the thing to think about when you're thinking about networking with vulnerability, or being vulnerable in your networking, is sharing what's appropriate at the time, what's engaging. If you have someone that you're working with where it's like they seem like it's a little held back, sometimes it's just asking, hey, I remember you said you were taking a trip. Did you get a chance to take that trip? Or even talking to someone about the fact that they didn't get to take their trip because of everything that's going on in the world, and be like, hey, yeah, how did that make you feel? Or what are you thinking about how you're going to address it? Having that conversation relaxes people's guards. It lets them talk about something that's near and dear to their hearts. And it's the perfect setup to being able to step into a conversation about other things that are just as important, just in a different way. Okay? So remember, first of all, that real connection is always the goal. Secondly, long-term relationships are built on trust. Now, here's the piece, and we started hinting at it a little bit, but we're going to dive into a little bit more here, which is shared experiences and empathy are created when vulnerability is expressed. I'm going to say that again. Shared experiences and empathy are created when vulnerability is expressed. What do I mean by that? So when you are willing and able to start talking about, hey, things are rough. We're all sitting home. We're working with kids in the other room and all of that. And you share a little bit about that. You're connecting, right? You're building up that empathy of, hey, I understand. I know what you feel. I've been there, right? Regardless of whatever the situation is. Or even if you haven't been there, you can express sympathy. That's the sympathy part rather than the empathy part. But by sharing those thoughts, by allowing others to share those thoughts and to engage, you're now building up this connection that will play out over the long run. Okay? You're now making connections on very real things. In very real ways, not artificially, right? This is not happy hour connecting. We're talking about connecting where in 2 years down the road, when you have a situation, you will be able to call this person up and say, hey, how are you doing? How's the family? Did y'all get to take that trip that you were planning yet? Great, awesome. Hey, I have this thing that's going on. I'd really like to get your input on it. That's what you're building towards. Now, I know that some people are like, yeah, that takes too long. I don't have time for that. You don't have time to build relationships that you can rely on for years into the future, because we all should have time for that. If you think you're going to get that type of return when you still engage in quote happy hour connecting, you are grossly mistaken. It's just not going to happen. And especially right now in these times when we're not even able to engage in that way, this is the time and the opportunity to take on a different approach. I mean, like, what is it going to hurt? What is it going to hurt to pick up the phone and call someone for real for a change and say, hey, I'm just checking on you to see how you're doing. I know things are a little crazy. Sending an email of like, thinking about you today, hope all is well, let me know if I can help you with anything. Or when you do connect with someone, that you're able to say, yeah, I totally get it. It's been nuts over here as well. And you start sharing some of those things. I know a lot of people think, well, we don't have time for that. You have to make time for it. Because in these times when we don't have the opportunity to connect in person as much as we would have normally, you now do have to take that extra step, make that extra effort to reach out and connect with people. And it doesn't have to be hard. It is literally the examples like what I just expressed. And it can be even so much more. So there are a couple examples that came to mind. One of them was from a few years ago, from when I was taking part in one of my leadership. I was in Leadership Austin, and we had an initial retreat where literally we're going in. We don't know who's been admitted, and it's all very hush hush till you get there, and then you start doing it. And it's literally we're on lockdown with these folks for 2 days at a space that where we're away from others, so that supposedly we can fully engage. And we're all like, I don't know. But here's the thing. When you have that, and the programming is so intense and so incredible, I've always spoken well of it. But when you get put in a room with other people and you're sharing answers to questions that maybe you haven't even shared with your closest family members or closest friends, but because of the environment and the zone of safety that's been created, you are now building up this trust because you've shared an experience. You've engaged in something that you hadn't necessarily done with someone else. And here's the thing, just because of that, and then moving forward so that we can discuss, the hard policy issues that are facing our society. We can discuss those opportunities for growth that come along the way, so that by the end of that period and the end of that leadership program, literally you have built up connections and relationships with people that will be around for a lifetime. Even those that you didn't get to spend as much time with, it's knowing that we went through that together. And so I can reach out to them knowing that we've established some level of vulnerability, some level of connection based on that shared experience. And literally down through the years, there are folks that I can now reach out and touch, and call, or that we've become closer and we're relying on each other for professional support or our organizations, whatever, all of those things. That's an example of something that can come from a shared experience. Something that literally just happened much more recently last week when I was attending a retreat with one of my coaches. And I was just flabbergasted about having that same level of experience virtually, right? Remotely, not in person. But how being able to create that level of connection, again, by making it a safe space for people to share, because the end goal is not to learn about every other person's business, but ultimately to say, hey, you know what? we've been there, or we're experiencing similar things, or these are all the other personal things or distractions that are impacting us in our ability to conduct business, to be our highest selves in our businesses as entrepreneurs. And how you can pull together that connection and those relationships so quickly is extremely, it's just one of those things that's a gift. Everybody can't do it, but you can do it as you move forward one on one with your network, with people in your network, with checking out with them, because you do know most of these people in some kind of way. And if you don't, then you reach out and you start trying to build that connection so that if and when you do need something or they need something, you're comfortable with reaching out to ask for that thing. This is not about the cold call. This is not about the you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. This is about building out relationships that will again last you beyond the next 30 days, 3 months, potentially even beyond the next 3 years. And when you take the time to nurture those relationships, that's when you build up that trust, you build up that confidence of knowing that, hey, I may not have talked to you in a while, but I know you're going to answer my call, absent there being some problem, or that you're going to you're going to return the email. Okay. Or that I can call you and say, hey, I know we haven't talked in a minute. How are you doing? What's going on with you? I'd really like to talk to you about X. So I want you to think about it. I mean, when I was working recently with one of my clients, actually a couple of different ones, this issue of vulnerability continues to show up. And how it plays out in our personal lives absolutely affects us in our professional lives with our professional goals. So don't try to compartmentalize it, because it can't be compartmentalized. All right? It is a part of who you are. So accept that and be willing to address it. Do what's best and most comfortable for you as you continue to grow. Work through that reflection time that we're always talking about. And then just thinking about, how can I put myself out there with one person this week? How can I, be a little more empathetic? How can I be a little more sympathetic? How can I let someone know that, hey, I really do understand what you're going through. Take the time to be more conscientious about how you're connecting with people, and it will always, always pay off. Okay? That's it. That's what we're talking about today in this Coffee Time Career Chat. We're talking about being a little more vulnerable in your networking efforts. Think about how you can put yourself out there with just one person this week. One. You can do it. Okay? I'm always happy to have a call. You can check, give me a shout and we can do a connect call. If you're interested in doing some coaching, absolutely, we can set up time to have a conversation about what that looks like for you, and if we're a good fit. And if it's not, we'll find you someone. But the goal is to make sure that you can go out there and achieve your goals. And the way you need to be able to do it is to make sure that you are maintaining strong professional relationships so that you can achieve the goals that you want to achieve over the time that you've set it for. Okay? So thanks again for everything. Let me know what you think. Let me hear from you. And I look forward to checking in with you again next week for Coffee Time Career Chat, Authentic Networking Edition. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.